And it doesn't mean they're pulling away from family. Instead, they're actually pressing in and becoming a bigger, deeper, wider part of your family. These are options that really prepare them for being adults, and it's not giving them license to just go waste those years on being frivolous, wondering who they're going to marry. It's helping them see the gifts that God's already given them and helping them develop them earlier.
Welcome to the Peachtree Podcast. Peachtree Learning Center is a nonprofit in Middle Tennessee dedicated to training and discipling students in all the fine arts to become excellent and skilled in order to spread the kingdom of God into the world of the arts. On this podcast, we will discuss topics designed to encourage, uplift, educate, and equip people to proclaim the kingdom more deeply in their own families and communities.
Hello and welcome again to Peachtree's podcast. We are in the throes of summer camps here, enjoying this beautiful space God gave us to occupy, loving having all the students in for a variety of camps every week. This week is extremely busy with several camps that are happening in the mornings and lots of people coming and going, and we have private lessons that happen, and it's just a sweet space. Even though it's a lot quieter than it is during the school year, we still enjoy getting to see the families that come for camps, and it's a fun way for people to try out Peachtree as a space and see if it's a place that they want to put their families, and we just love being able to hear music and drama happening during the summer as well. So hopefully your family's having a great summer and possibly enjoying some fun time together, and quality time at home is always important. But I wanted to continue our thought series. We started a series of a few podcasts ago about what needs to happen for your children after college, after high school, and the notion that college is one path, but it's not an automatic path. It certainly isn't automatic as far as success goes. It's sometimes automatically a road to lots of debt and lots of stress trying to find a job in your chosen field. And it's also sometimes a path to great things. And so I'm not disparaging it in that way, but just offering up options is an important thing to do as a parent, to sift through a variety of options and not to ever feel like you're in a cattle chute and there's only one answer to your children's questions. So backing up a little bit, I wanted to go back and talk a little some about the idea of teenagers and what the teenage years are supposed to look like, and encourage parents that teenagers actually, while they're asserting independence in fresh ways, they also need you really more than ever. I've experienced that, and I've also seen that in other families that I admire and believe were intentional, that a lot of times as 15 and 16-year-old children who are pushing you away really still need to come and sit and talk under your arm and listen to you and lean into you, and sometimes just get tickled again and remember the joy of childhood, but they also need your advice and your strength in a fresh way as they look outside at the world and wonder what in the world their place is. So there was a book that helped me an awful lot with this specific topic. It's called The Age of Opportunity, and it's by Paul David Tripp. You should go find a copy somewhere and just pick it up and read it. Even if you have young children, it would be a great place to start for forming a framework that would shape your child's teen years, because he really brought out some points about teenage years that were super important. And I want to start this conversation by remembering a quote that I read from a different teacher named James Dobson. He was with Focus on the Family for a long time. And he said something in a book that I read ages ago. He said that parents who were successful and made successful families stay close and enjoy each other were families who brought their children extremely close when they were young and then were able to let them find their way when they got older. And he talked about the notion that by the time a child is 5, they're 50% formed in their emotional stability, in the way they view the world, in their personal interactions. They were 50% formed by the age of 5, which if you have a 6-year-old and you're just thinking about that is terrifying. But it's not a hard and fast rule, obviously, but he felt like in his experience and in his training and what he'd seen in his practice, that children who were 5 had a lot of those habits and thought processes already in place, and they would not change easily. And then he said another 25% of the formation of your child happens between the ages of 5 and 12. So a different type of learning happens. They get out of the rote memorization of facts. They start to ask questions. They start to need more information to understand why decisions were made. They begin to be able to handle more deep discussions of bigger topics, not necessarily abstract topics, but understanding facts and why they are there and how they work to form the world around them. And then he said, really, by the age of 12, that means they're 75% formed. And so 12 to 18, 18 to 20-ish is really a cementing of the person that you've already molded and already helped shape. And so the scripture that tells us, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That scripture really impacts those young years. So those tiny baby days, those teeny toddler times when you get tired or you think this is meaningless, I'm doing the same thing 25 days in a row, I'm doing the same thing 325 days in a row. It really takes on a different shape in your mind if you think, I'm training up this child in the way he should go. And the Hebrew words there, from my understanding, mean that you're training him up in the way that God made him to go. So you're figuring out who that person is, and you're helping them find who God made them to be, and you're helping them train that way so that they will never leave it. So if you have someone that God made into an artist, let's say, you're training that child's already God-given impetus. You're already helping them find the shape of that. Then they won't depart from it, which is what he needs you to do. He needs you to help cement in them what they are supposed to be. He already gave them the raw materials. It's your job as mom and dad to figure out what those are and what they're supposed to build with them. And then once they've learned that, when they're old, they will not depart from it. So they will not quit being the person God made them to be. And there are several layers of meaning in that verse, but this is definitely one that stuck out to me when I studied this years ago when my children were young, that I was partly supposed to just unpack who they are already and then help shape that so that they could keep it forever. And that speaks again also to the idea of seeing your child as a young child already a human being and already a formed person, and even looking ahead and trying to figure out what adult they're going to be and what kind of adult you would like them to be. And I remember wanting to know that I was going to raise children that I liked being around and that I thought other people would enjoy, but also children that were walking out their gifts so that they would never feel the regret of missing out on what they were really called to do. This informs the teenage years, especially because those are years when children do decide what they're going to do, or at least they start to think about who they're going to be on a deeper level. And by the time they're 18, they kind of already know who they are, or they should have a very deep sense of who they are as people. But also they need to be equipped. And there's an equipping that happens in those teenage years. They get ready to deal with relationships outside the family. They get ready to have deep friendships. They get ready to hold jobs or hold careers or take their gifts and go bless people with them and figure out ways to make money at what they are made to do. They figure out ways to go and form families. They figure out how to drive a car. They learn how to pay their bills. And there's just this whole raft of things that they need to know by the time they're 18 to 20. And in our modern world, it has become the norm for children between 13 and 18 to really sometimes just check out and take a rain check on that half a decade and decide that it's really more about being on my phone and being all social, and my family is less important, and I don't have to invest in those relationships because they're already there. I need to go spend time with friends, and that friend group changes from month to month based on who likes me today or what makes me feel good today. And this is a totally false and absolutely insecure way to live, and we're teaching young teenagers and older teenagers that being irresponsible is actually the fun part, and that being fickle is actually okay, and that the current dating scene also speaks to the fact that you don't have to be true to anybody. You get to pick somebody to go out with and be intense with for a while and then drop them and go find someone else. And this is all very unintentional living, and it's very astonishing to me to go back and look and realize that 100 years ago, that was not even a way of life, and that's talked down about as if it was bad, that teenagers had work to do. But when you actually go and look at history, and you read, let's just say you read 1st and 2nd Kings, you see king after king after king in the kingdom of Israel and also Judah who were young men. And you look at the king Josiah, who was 8 when he came to the throne. Now, he obviously had help, but he started reigning when he was 8. God put him on the throne. God put him in a place where he was the sovereign. And you go and look at Alexander the Great, and he was a teenager when he started conquering lands with his army. You read about King Arthur, and you know that he was not an older man when he started his campaign to make England a united country. You let your children read those stories. You let them think about what these people were doing when they were young. And you let that percolate into those hearts and help them understand that there is a lot of power in being young and also being formed and ready for responsibility. Or you let that help them make choices, and you let that help you make decisions about what you give them to be responsible for. And you set a higher bar for expectations of behavior and also of empowering them to go forth and make decisions for the family. You let that 16-year-old drive away in the family car with the grocery list and a debit card or some cash, and you say, go make these choices, go find these groceries, come home in an hour, with everything on the list. You start to give them the reins, so to speak, for how your household runs. And it doesn't mean they're pulling away from family. Instead, they're actually pressing in and becoming a bigger, deeper, wider part of your family. These are options that really prepare them for being adults. And it's not giving them license to just go waste those years on being frivolous, wondering who they're going to marry. It's helping them see the gifts that God's already given them and helping them develop them earlier. One of the parts of this book that really spoke to me was idols that parents make of different things. And I realized in my own life that I had idols that I didn't even know about. But when we got to teenage years, he talks about idols that were in the way in parents' hearts. And one of them was the idol of comfort, and how we abandon our post as parents because we just don't want the conflict. And we have, sometimes people have struggles with the idol of respect. We want respect from our children, which is a good thing. But he says here on page 32, it must not be the thing that controls my heart, and I will not personalize what is not personal. And a lot of times children rebel, not out of personal angst against you or personal vindictiveness, but really just against the situation that they find themselves in. And not making an idol of their respect is a very important aspect of being a parent. We can make an idol out of appreciation. We can make an idol out of worldly success. We can even make an idol out of control. And that was something that's really hard to think about, was as your child gets older and you think you want your kids to turn out just like you. That is not your goal. Your goal is not to make mini me's. Your goal is to make the people that God made them to be. And one quote that I have underlined says, only God can exercise that kind of control. The goal is to be used of Him to instill in our children an ever-maturing self-control through the principles of the Word, and to allow them to exercise ever-widening circles of choice, control, and independence. First, there is no situation that is not under control because Christ rules over all things for the sake of His body, Ephesians 1:22. Second, not only is the situation under His control, but God is at work in doing the thing that He has promised to do, Romans 8:28. And it helped me a lot to remember that my children were under the authority of Christ at all times. And then third, he says, I need to remember that the goal of my parenting is not to conform my children to my image, but to work so they are conformed to the image of Christ. My goal is not to clone my tastes, my opinions, and my habits in my children. I'm not looking for my image in them. I long to see Christ's image. That was a very powerful statement for me. I had that on my mirror for a while because it's something that I had definitely not considered in that way, and realized that I had too many roots of that in my own parenting, and it needed to be let go before we got to a point where that became a conflict, because children absolutely get to the point where they cannot take your advice and your input, and you need to back away. And that's not a perfect process, and there's definitely going to be rubbings and scrapings, but being willing to be humble and come back and tell them, that they've got the know-how and they've got what they need to make those choices is a very important part of getting to stay in their lives as they grow up. There's a lot of other things in this book that I could talk about. I've got tubs of stuff underlined in the first half, but I'll just encourage you again to think about your children, even as they're young. Think about what they're going to do and who they're going to be and who God made them to be, and help them unpack those things. And if you want a book to look at and help you, this book is called The Age of Opportunity. It's a biblical guide to parenting teens. It's by Paul David Tripp. It's at least 20 years old, so you could probably find a good used copy somewhere, or you can go find your own on Amazon or some other bookstore. Find your local bookstore. That's a much better choice. Go find a copy of this book and order it, and then just pray and pray through the scriptures that talk about raising children. Go to Proverbs and see what he says. He doesn't talk about children as if they're little bitties and that they're supposed to be shunned and their opinions don't matter. He talks about children as if they're fully formed human beings that just need to be encouraged and trained and discipled. So think about these things as you raise your children. These are good principles to live by. Hope you have a wonderfully blessed week.
Thank you so much for joining us today. To support this podcast, please go follow us on your podcast platform of choice. And if you're interested in knowing more about the work of Peachtree, please go visit our website at peachtreelearningcenter.com for more information.